Bride's family humiliated black maid. Mafia boss canceled the wedding. The evening air was thick with anticipation as the grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers casting soft light over the elegant crowd. The wedding of Bianca and James was about to take place in one of the most luxurious venues in the city, with guests dressed in tuxedos and flowing gowns, sipping champagne, and chatting in low voices. But in the corner, far from the sparkling smiles and laughter, stood Lila, the black maid who had been hired for the event, her job to ensure everything ran smoothly. Lila stood by the corner near the entrance, trying her best to remain invisible, just as she had been trained to do. She kept her eyes lowered, her back straight, trying to avoid the glares from the guests. It wasn't easy. The soft whispers and sideways glances made it clear she didn't belong in their world. Her uniform, though crisp and clean, was a constant reminder of her place in their eyes. Just a servant, nothing more. As she adjusted the silverware on the tables, she could hear the laughter from a group of guests seated near the center of the room. "I can't believe they hired her for this event," one of them sneered. Lila's hands trembled slightly as she moved toward the table to clear a glass. What did they expect? A real maid for a real wedding. Another voice chimed in. Lila didn't dare look up, her heart pounding in her chest as the harsh words washed over her. She had been in this position many times before, but tonight, it felt different. Her breath quickened as she felt the weight of their judgment on her shoulders. She had worked tirelessly to get here, to be part of something more, but here she was, stuck in this role, invisible to everyone but the people who couldn't wait to belittle her. As she moved to the next table, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me," came the crisp tone of the bride's mother, her eyes narrow with disdain. "Could you please make sure the champagne is cold? It's quite unacceptable for a wedding like this to serve warm drinks. Do you understand?" Lila nodded quickly, forcing a polite smile. "Of course, ma'am," she replied softly, turning away. But the mother wasn't finished. "I don't know why we have to hire someone like you for these events. You barely fit in here," she continued, her words sharp and loud enough for the people around to hear. Lila's chest tightened. She felt the burn of humiliation creeping up her neck. She couldn't reply, couldn't defend herself. She knew better than to make a scene. She simply nodded again and hurried away, her heart sinking with each step. But as she turned to leave the room, she didn't notice the figure that had been silently watching from the back. Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss, stood in the shadows, his arms crossed over his chest. His piercing eyes followed her every move, taking in the scene unfolding before him. He had been to countless events like this, where the wealthy looked down on those who served them. But something about this moment caught his attention. His gaze shifted from Lila to the bride's mother, who was now laughing with her friends. Dominic's jaw tightened. He had seen enough. The day's event was meant to be a celebration, but the way they were treating Lila was unforgivable. With a swift motion, he walked toward the center of the room, his footsteps silent but firm. The room seemed to part in front of him as people recognized his presence. The whispers started almost immediately. He was known for his ruthlessness, his cold demeanor, and his power. But today, something about this event stirred something deeper within him. As the guests watched, he stepped forward, his eyes locked on the bride's family. "You've made a mistake," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the room. The laughter from the bride's mother and her friends faltered. All eyes turned to Dominic as he continued. "This wedding is over." As the guests watched in stunned silence, Dominic's voice echoed through the ballroom. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. The laughter, the music, the chatter, all of it faded as people turned their attention to him. The power he exuded was undeniable. His cold, calculating gaze locked on the bride's mother, who had just moments before humiliated Lila. "This wedding is over," he repeated, his voice calm, yet filled with authority. Bianca, the bride, stood frozen in shock. She was still holding her bouquet, her face pale, unable to process the scene unfolding before her. Her mother, once confident and sharp-tongued, now looked small and defenseless. The guests, many of whom had seen Dominic around but never in a situation like this, exchanged nervous glances. No one dared to speak. They all knew who he was, Dominic Romano, the youngest boss to ever run the most powerful mafia family in the city. His reputation preceded him, and it wasn't one that anyone dared challenge. Bianca's mother, still shocked, finally found her voice. "What do you mean? This is our daughter's wedding, and you are ruining everything," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. Dominic didn't flinch. He remained unfazed, his dark eyes piercing. "You humiliated her," he said coldly, pointing toward Lila, who had retreated to the side of the room, too embarrassed to look up. "And for that, there is no forgiveness. This wedding, this event, it's over. You've lost everything." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Bianca's mother tried to argue, but Dominic raised his hand, silencing her immediately. "You," he said, turning his attention to the other members of the bride's family, "are no better. All of you are complicit in this." His gaze swept over the room, and in that moment, it felt as though he was judging every single person in the ballroom. Lila, still standing by the corner, watched the unfolding drama with a mixture of disbelief and relief. The humiliation she had suffered moments ago now seemed insignificant compared to the power Dominic was unleashing. As she stood there, her thoughts raced. What had just happened? She had never imagined in 1,000 years that someone like Dominic Romano would stand up for her, let alone cancel a wedding. But there he was, his towering presence dominating the room. The bride's family was in shock, their world crumbling as Dominic's decision took hold. Bianca's father, an imposing man himself, stepped forward, trying to salvage some control of the situation. "You can't do this," he said, his voice laced with anger. "This is our daughter's life you're ruining." Dominic's eyes locked onto him, his expression unchanged. "You're lucky I haven't done worse," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You and your family have disrespected someone who didn't deserve it. No one walks away from this unscathed. Not after the way you treated her." Lila could hardly believe what was happening. She felt as if she were watching a dream unfold, a dream she had never dared to dream. The chaos, the shattering of Bianca's perfect day, felt strangely satisfying. As her heart began to settle, she found herself looking at Dominic, the man who had just destroyed the life of the woman who had hurt her, but somehow, she didn't feel bad for Bianca. Bianca had been nothing but cruel to her, treating her like a lesser being for no reason other than her job and her skin color. And now, she was getting a taste of her own medicine. Bianca's father took a step forward, his face red with frustration. "We won't stand for this," he said through clenched teeth. "You'll regret this, Dominic." Dominic's gaze hardened. "I think you'll be the one regretting this. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be taking my leave. But don't worry, this won't be forgotten." With that, he turned, his bodyguards following closely behind. The guests remained silent, some unsure of whether to applaud or leave. The bride, still stunned, slowly looked at Lila. For the first time, their eyes met. Lila saw a flash of something. Perhaps it was shame, perhaps it was realization, but whatever it was, it didn't matter. The damage had been done. And as Dominic left the ballroom with his guards, the wedding that was supposed to be the highlight of Bianca's life crumbled before her eyes, all because of the humiliation she had allowed to take place. The door slammed shut behind Dominic and his entourage, and a silence fell over the room. It was as if the entire world had stopped spinning for a moment, and everyone was left to absorb the consequences of the events that had just transpired. The echoes of Dominic's voice still hung in the air long after he and his entourage left the ballroom. The silence was thick, like a fog that couldn't be shaken off. The guests, once lost in the glamour of the evening, now stood frozen in a kind of stunned disbelief. Bianca, still holding her bouquet, could feel the weight of the situation press down on her chest. She didn't know whether to scream or break down in tears. Her perfect day, her wedding day, was over, gone. Not because of some random mishap or a mistake, but because of the undeniable power and presence of the man who had just made the impossible decision to end everything. She glanced toward her mother, who was standing at the back of the room, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. Her mother's eyes were burning with fury, but there was something else in them, fear. Bianca had never seen her mother look so vulnerable. She turned and walked away, making her way through the sea of bewildered guests, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. But as she moved, she couldn't shake the image of Lila standing in the corner, the maid who had unknowingly set this chain of events into motion. Lila, the woman who had been subjected to her family's cruelty, who had been reduced to nothing more than a servant in their eyes. But now, for the first time, Bianca saw her differently. There was something in her that commanded attention, something that made the room feel smaller, less significant in comparison to her quiet dignity. Bianca's heart sank. She had been so cruel. To Lila. To everyone. It was all for show, wasn't it? All the wealth, the luxury, the perfection, it was just a mask, a performance to keep the world from seeing what was beneath. She wasn't proud of it. Not anymore. She pushed her way through the crowd, her mind racing with confusion, regret, and anger. But as she neared the door, she stopped. Lila was still standing there, but now she wasn't alone. Dominic had returned. He wasn't in a hurry this time. He walked toward her slowly, his footsteps measured, and she could feel the tension in the room rise once more. Lila, for her part, didn't move. She didn't even flinch when he approached. She had no idea why he was back, but she knew better than to question him. He stopped in front of her, towering over her with his usual cold, commanding presence. But this time, his gaze was different. There was no judgment, no anger, just a kind of calm intensity that seemed to soften the sharp edges of his usual demeanor. "You," he said, his voice low and steady, "were the only one who didn't make a scene." Lila didn't answer. She wasn't sure what he meant, but she felt a flicker of something in her chest. Something that might have been hope, but she pushed it aside. She wasn't here for him. She wasn't here for anyone. "It wasn't easy," she said quietly, looking up at him. "But I've learned not to react to people like that. It's not worth it." Dominic's expression softened ever so slightly. He seemed to consider her words for a moment, before his gaze flicked back to Bianca, who was still standing at the far side of the room, watching them. Bianca's eyes met his, but she didn't say anything. The words were stuck in her throat. She wanted to apologize, to explain herself. But what could she say? Dominic didn't wait for her to speak. Instead, he turned his attention back to Lila, his gaze now firm. "I want to offer you something," he said, his voice unwavering. "You've been treated like dirt in a place where you didn't deserve to be. I won't stand for it. I know the kind of people they are, and I'm not leaving without making things right." Lila blinked, uncertain of what he meant. He had already destroyed the wedding, shattered her world in an instant, but now he was offering her something else. What could that possibly be? "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Dominic's lips curled into a slight smile. "I'm offering you a chance to walk away from this mess and never look back. You don't belong here, Lila. You deserve better." Lila's heart skipped a beat. "Better?" she repeated, her mind struggling to process his words. He nodded, his eyes unwavering. "Come with me. Let's leave this place behind." The room had fallen silent again, but now it was a different kind of silence. The guests stood still, watching, uncertain of what was happening. But for Lila, it felt like the world was shifting beneath her feet. She had never imagined a moment like this. A moment where the man who had torn her life apart would now offer her a chance at something more. Something better. She looked at Dominic, then back at the room she had worked so hard to be a part of. And without a word, she turned away from it all. And just like that, the future she never thought possible began to unfold before her. The wedding was over. But for Lila, a new beginning was just beginning. The air was thick with uncertainty as Lila stood beside Dominic, the man who had just turned her world upside down. She had stepped away from the chaos of the wedding, but now she was faced with a new kind of chaos, her future. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure what to do next. She had never imagined this. She had spent so many years just trying to get by, surviving in the background, doing her job, and keeping her head down. Now, Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss, was offering her something she never thought possible, a chance to escape everything. "Come with me," he had said. And for the first time in her life, Lila felt the weight of a decision that could change everything. She had no family here, no one who cared about her enough to stand up for her. But Dominic, despite everything he represented, had seen something in her. He had defended her when no one else would, and now he was offering her a way out. She couldn't help but wonder, what was the catch? She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Dominic's gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. "Because you deserve better," he said simply. "You've been treated like dirt, and that's not how it should be." Lila felt a strange warmth spread through her chest at his words. She didn't know what to make of him. He was a man who had destroyed a wedding without a second thought, a man whose family had built its empire on fear. But there was something about him that seemed different in that moment. He wasn't just a cold mafia boss. He was a man who had seen the injustice in front of him and couldn't ignore it. But what about the wedding? She asked, glancing back at the room. It's ruined, Dominic said, his voice sharp. It doesn't matter anymore. The people in there have already shown their true colors. Lila knew he was right. The family she had once thought was above reproach had revealed its ugliness in the way they had treated her. Bianca's mother, the woman who had humiliated her in front of everyone, had shown just how little respect she had for anyone beneath her. And Bianca, the bride, who had seemed so sweet at first, had stood by and let it all happen. Lila had expected better from her. She had expected more from the people who should have been her allies. But in the end, she had been nothing but a pawn in their game. She turned away from the ballroom, her heart still racing. She had made her decision. Okay, she said quietly, looking up at Dominic. I'll go with you. A small smile tugged at Dominic's lips, and for a moment, his usual hardness softened. Good choice, he said. With a nod, he motioned for her to follow him. They walked toward the exit, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the now silent room. As they reached the door, Lila paused, looking back one last time at the place that had been both her prison and her source of torment. She didn't know what the future held for her, but she knew she couldn't stay there any longer. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and they stepped out into the cool night air. The lights of the city flickered in the distance, and for the first time in a long time, Lila felt a sense of freedom. It wasn't the kind of freedom she had always imagined. There were no grand promises, no guarantees of happiness. But it was hers. And for once, she was the one in control. Where are we going? Lila asked, glancing up at Dominic. Somewhere you can start fresh, he replied. He paused for a moment before adding, I know you've had a rough time, but I don't want to see anyone mistreated like that again. Not on my watch. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected kindness from him, especially not after all he had done. But there it was, quietly spoken, a promise not of grand gestures, but of something far more meaningful, respect. She couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. As they walked through the quiet streets, Lila's mind raced. She had no idea where this path would lead, but for the first time in her life, she was walking it on her own terms. And that, she realized, was all that mattered. Lila stepped into the sleek, black car that was waiting for her, the cool leather seats a sharp contrast to the chaos she had just left behind. Dominic slid in beside her, his expression unreadable as the car began to move. She could feel the tension in the air between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else, something unfamiliar. As the city lights flickered by outside, Lila took a deep breath. She wasn't sure where they were going or why Dominic had brought her with him, but something told her this wasn't just about what happened at the wedding. He was offering her more than a ride away from the chaos. He was offering her an opportunity. But what kind of opportunity? What happens now? She asked, her voice tentative. Dominic looked at her, his dark eyes steady. Now you're free. You can do whatever you want. Start fresh. Take control of your own life. Lila felt a knot tighten in her stomach. But I don't even know where to begin. My whole life has been about surviving, getting by. I've never had the chance to decide for myself. Dominic's voice softened slightly. That's exactly why I'm doing this. You deserve more than just getting by. You deserve to live the life you want, not the one other people have forced on you. His words hit her harder than she expected. Lila had spent so many years simply existing, never daring to dream of anything more than what she could manage in the moment. Now, Dominic was giving her a chance to change that. The weight of his offer pressed heavily on her, but in a way that made her feel lighter. What if I fail? She asked quietly. Dominic's lips curled slightly. Failure isn't what you should be worried about. What matters is that you try. I've seen you put up with more than most people could ever imagine. That strength, that resilience, you can do anything with that. Lila wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself, but the sincerity in his words gave her something to hold on to. She had been told her whole life that she was nothing more than a tool, someone to be used and discarded. But Dominic, in his own strange way, was treating her like she mattered. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she might have a say in her own future. The car turned a corner and slowed down, pulling into a quiet neighborhood. The houses were large, but not ostentatious. It wasn't the kind of place that screamed wealth, but it held a quiet kind of elegance. Dominic's car came to a stop in front of one of the homes, a well-kept place with a modest front yard. "This is where you'll stay for now," Dominic said as he got out of the car. "It's not much, but it's safe. You can take the time you need to figure out what you want to do." Lila stepped out of the car, her heart racing. She looked at the house in front of her, unsure what to make of it. This wasn't a mansion like the one she'd cleaned, but it was different. This place was hers, if she wanted it to be. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little shaky. "You don't have to thank me," Dominic replied. "You deserve this. A chance to live a life without fear, without being treated like you're less than anyone else." His words stirred something deep inside her. The kindness in his voice was foreign, something she hadn't expected from a man like him. Lila had spent so much of her life just getting by, just surviving. She had never allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to have control, to have the freedom to make her own choices. But here she was, in front of a house that could be hers, in a life that could be hers if she was brave enough to take it. "You don't have to stay here forever," Dominic added, as if reading her thoughts. "But this is a safe place to start." Lila nodded, the weight of everything starting to settle in. She had a lot of decisions to make. But for the first time in years, she had the space to think about what she truly wanted. As she watched Dominic drive away, she couldn't help but wonder if this was all real. Had her life really just been turned upside down by the man who had canceled a wedding in front of hundreds of people? But then, she looked at the house again, and a small spark of hope flickered in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something better. Lila took a deep breath and stepped inside the house, ready to start the next chapter of her life. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could finally write her own story. The following days were a blur for Lila. The quiet suburban house that Dominic had arranged for her felt like a dream, a strange, unfamiliar life where the world outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant. She spent her days in solitude, taking time to process everything that had happened. The wedding, the humiliation, Dominic's unexpected kindness. For the first time in years, she wasn't worried about being yelled at or belittled. She wasn't having to keep her head down, always invisible. But the silence was deafening. Lila knew she couldn't stay in this bubble forever. At some point, she had to figure out what came next. Every day she spent in the house felt like a gift, but it also weighed heavily on her. She knew she couldn't live in this kind of limbo. Dominic had given her the chance to start over, to build a new life. But how was she supposed to start? She didn't have the answers. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized how little she knew about herself beyond surviving. Lila had spent so many years being invisible, being part of the background, that she didn't know what she wanted. She didn't know what it meant to live a life she chose. As she sat in the quiet kitchen one evening, she found herself staring out the window at the darkening sky, wondering what her next steps should be. She had no job, no clear path, and no idea where to even begin. The house was beautiful in its simplicity, but it wasn't hers. It felt like a temporary refuge, not a home. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. She stood up slowly, unsure of who it could be. As she opened the door, she found Dominic standing there, his usual commanding presence softened by the casual nature of his visit. He was dressed in black, of course, but today he didn't have that hard edge she was used to. Instead, he was different. Maybe it was the way he was standing, slightly more relaxed, as though he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Hey," he said, giving her a small smile. "Got a minute?" Lila blinked, surprised. Sure. Come in," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Dominic walked in, his eyes scanning the room briefly before focusing back on her. There was something different in his gaze today, like he wasn't just the Mafia boss. He was someone who saw her as more than just a maid. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice soft but sincere. Lila hesitated. "I don't know. I guess I'm okay. Just trying to figure things out, you know?" Dominic nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I know it's not easy, starting over. But I want you to know you don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help however I can." His words made something inside Lila twist, a mixture of gratitude and confusion. She hadn't expected him to be so open, so willing to help. The man who had canceled a wedding in front of dozens of people, who had the power to ruin lives without a second thought, was offering her something different. He was offering her a chance at something real. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't asked for him to step into her life, but somehow, he had. I don't know where to go from here, she admitted, her voice a little shakier than she wanted it to be. I've never been in a position where I can make decisions for myself. I don't know what I want. Dominic's expression softened. He stepped closer, not in a threatening way, but with an unspoken understanding. You'll figure it out, he said, his tone steady. I'm not asking you to have it all figured out right now. Just take it one day at a time. Lila looked down, letting his words sink in. One day at a time. She could do that. Maybe that was the key, just taking small steps. Have you ever thought about doing something for yourself? Dominic asked, as if reading her thoughts. Something that makes you happy? What do you enjoy doing? Lila looked up at him, surprised by the question. I don't even know, she said, shaking her head. I've been so busy just surviving. I never really thought about what makes me happy. Dominic smiled faintly. I get it. But it's never too late. You can start now. Do whatever you want. You have that power. The words hit her harder than she expected. The weight of what he was offering sank in. It wasn't just about leaving the wedding behind. It was about reclaiming her life, her choices. Lila had been living in the shadows for so long that the idea of standing in the light was almost overwhelming. But maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to stop being invisible. Dominic was offering her freedom, a chance to take control. The thought of that, of living a life that was hers to shape, made something stir inside her, a sense of possibility. It was terrifying, but it was also exciting. Thank you, she said quietly, meeting his gaze. I don't know what to do with this, but I'll try. Dominic gave a small nod. That's all anyone can do. You're not alone in this, Lila. Not anymore. And in that moment, as she stood there facing him, Lila realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something she had always dreamed of but never dared to hope for. The beginning of a life that was truly hers. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Lila. Each morning, she woke up to the quiet solitude of the house, a far cry from the noise and chaos of the life she had known. For the first time in years, there was no frantic rush, no looming deadlines, no yelling or commands from others. It was just her. But with that peace came uncertainty. She had everything she needed, food, shelter, comfort, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Dominic had given her the space to breathe, to think, and to explore what she wanted for her future. But now, she needed to face the reality of it all. It wasn't just about escaping her past. It was about building a future she had never dared to dream of before. Lila had spent so many years just surviving, doing what she needed to do to make it through the day, that she had never truly stopped to ask herself what she wanted out of life. Now, she was forced to face that question head-on. But the answer wasn't easy. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. She couldn't stay in this house forever. She had to make something of herself, create a life that was truly hers. But where did she even begin? One evening, as Lila sat on the porch, watching the sunset, she heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the driveway. She turned to see Dominic's car parked in front of the house. He stepped out, his expression as calm and confident as ever, but today there was a softness to him, a quiet kind of concern. Hey, Lila, he said, his voice casual but gentle. Got a minute? She smiled faintly and nodded. Of course. Come on in. Dominic stepped up onto the porch and took a seat beside her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The quiet of the evening stretched on, the only sound being the gentle rustling of the leaves in the breeze. Finally, Dominic spoke, his voice quieter than usual. How are you holding up? Lila looked at him, her gaze uncertain. I don't know, she said honestly. I'm grateful for everything you've done, Dominic. But it's hard. It's hard not knowing what comes next. He nodded, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. I get it, he said. You've been thrown into this new life with no map, no directions. It's a lot to take in. Lila took a deep breath. I've always just done what I was told, lived by others' rules. Now, for the first time, I have to figure out what I want. And I'm scared I'll mess it up. Dominic looked at her with a calm intensity. Lila, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. No one does. But I see something in you. You're strong. You've been through a lot, and you're still standing. That's not something everyone can say. Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had never had anyone speak to her like that, like she was worth something, like she mattered. You've got time, Dominic continued. You don't need to rush into anything. But I want you to know something. You've got a future ahead of you. And if you want it, I'm here to help you make it happen. Lila's eyes widened slightly. You don't have to do that, she said quickly. I don't need you to fix everything for me. Dominic gave her a small, reassuring smile. I'm not trying to fix you, Lila. I'm trying to give you the tools to build what you want. You're the one who's going to make it happen. I'm just here to support you. His words resonated deeply within her. She had spent so long in a world where people saw her as less than nothing, as someone to be used, to be kept in the background. But now, for the first time, she felt like she could be more. Like she could stand up and be seen. What do you want? Dominic asked, his voice softer now. For your future. What do you want out of it? Lila thought for a moment, the question stirring something inside her. I want to be independent. I want to do something for myself. I want to know that I can take care of myself, that I'm not just some invisible person in the background. Dominic nodded, his gaze steady. That's a start, he said. What's next? Lila smiled, a small but genuine smile. I think I want to help people. I don't know how yet, but I've seen so much pain in my life. I want to do something that helps others. Something that gives me purpose. The words felt strange on her tongue, like she had never truly allowed herself to want something like that before. But as she spoke them, they felt right. Dominic's expression softened. That's a good goal, he said quietly. And I'll help you get there, if that's what you want. Lila felt a sense of clarity settle over her. For the first time, she felt like she had a direction. She didn't know exactly how it would all unfold, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had control. Dominic stood up, his posture still calm and confident. Take your time, he said, his voice firm but warm. When you're ready, we'll figure out the next step. As he walked toward the door, Lila stayed on the porch for a moment longer, watching the last of the daylight fade into the horizon. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew she was finally in control of her own story. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. Lila stood at the edge of the porch. The evening sky stretched out before her in hues of orange and pink. The world around her was quiet, but her mind was racing. For the first time in years, she was free. But with that freedom came a new kind of fear, a fear of what to do with it. She had never had the luxury of choice. Growing up, she had always been told what to do, where to go, and how to act. She had been invisible to most people, treated like she didn't matter, just a face in the background. Now, for the first time in her life, she was asked what she wanted, what she truly wanted. It was a question she didn't know how to answer. As the days passed, Lila spent more time thinking about her future. She spent hours walking around the quiet neighborhood, observing people who had lives she had always dreamed of. Families walking their dogs, children playing in the park, neighbors chatting over fences. A simple life. A life that she never thought she could have. But now, she realized, it was possible. She could build something for herself, if she was brave enough to try. And that's when the thought hit her. She wanted to help people. She had always been the one helping others, even when no one asked. Whether it was cleaning houses, serving food, or taking care of people's needs, she had always been the one in the background, the one who fixed things for others. But what if she could help people in a way that actually mattered? What if she could be the one to make a difference, to use her strength and resilience to create something lasting? The idea excited her, but it also scared her. How could someone like her, someone who had always been in the shadows, make a real impact? Could she even do it? One afternoon, Dominic showed up at the house again. He had been checking in on her more frequently lately, offering encouragement and guidance whenever she needed it. Today, he had a different look in his eyes, a sense of purpose that caught Lila off guard. He had been offering her freedom, but now, it seemed like he was offering something more, something that might help her take the next step. I've been thinking, Dominic said as he entered the house, his voice steady. You've been through a lot, Lila, but I know you're capable of more than you think. You've got something inside you that can help others. I want to help you make that happen. Lila blinked, not quite understanding. What do you mean? She asked. Dominic took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. I've been talking to some people I trust. You've got the kind of spirit that can change lives. I'm putting together a project, a way for you to use your experiences, your strength, to help others who are in need. It's not just about giving handouts. It's about making a real difference. Helping people stand up for themselves, giving them the tools they need to take control of their lives. Lila felt her heart race. This was what she had been waiting for, the opportunity to do something that mattered. But she was still hesitant. But I don't know how to start something like that, she said quietly. I've never run anything. I don't have the experience. Dominic nodded. I know. But that's why I'm offering you the chance to learn. We can get you the training, the resources, everything you need. I'll be here to support you every step of the way. His words were a lifeline, something that reached out to her in a way she had never experienced. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She wasn't just being given something to survive. She was being given something to build, to grow, to thrive. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice shaky. I've spent so long being nothing more than what people expected me to be. Dominic's eyes softened, and for the first time, she saw something deeper in him, something that wasn't just about power. Lila, he said quietly, I've seen you fight. I've seen you stand up when everyone else was trying to put you down. That's what matters. The rest is just a matter of learning. You've already got the hardest part. Lila swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice firm. I'll try. I'll make this work. Dominic smiled, a rare and genuine smile that lit up his face. I knew you would. You've got this, Lila. I'm proud of you. She couldn't help but feel a swell of emotion. This was it. This was her chance to take control of her life, to stop being invisible. And it was all because someone had seen her, had given her the chance to do more than just survive. As Dominic left the house that day, Lila stood at the window, watching him disappear down the street. For the first time, she felt like she had a future that was entirely her own. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for it. And this time, she wasn't going to let anyone hold her back. Lila stood in front of the small community center, the place that had become her first real step into the future she was trying to build. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The building was modest, with peeling paint and windows that needed cleaning, but to Lila, it represented everything she had ever wanted, a place to make a difference. For the first time, she felt like she was not just surviving, but living. Dominic had kept his promise. He had helped her get the training she needed, connected her with people who could teach her about running a nonprofit, and now she was ready to put everything into action. The center would focus on helping women and children who had been in situations like hers, mistreated, undervalued, and forgotten. She had always known that helping others was her calling, but it wasn't until Dominic had made her realize it that she could even begin to imagine herself in this role. Today was the first step. Lila looked at the stack of paperwork on the desk in front of her and took a deep breath. This was it. She was officially starting her nonprofit. She had no idea how it would go, but for the first time, she felt ready to take that leap. Her past had been full of hard work and survival, but it had never been her choice. This was her choice. As she opened the door to the small center, she felt the weight of her decision settle on her shoulders. The room was empty, but there was something about it that made her feel at home. The empty space seemed to echo with possibilities. You can do this, she whispered to herself, pushing the door fully open and stepping inside. It was quiet at first, but then she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. Looking up, she saw Dominic standing in the doorway, a smile on his face. How's it going? He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes filled with something else. Pride, maybe, or maybe it was just the knowledge that she was stepping into a new chapter of her life. Lila smiled back, feeling the familiar warmth of gratitude. I think it's going well. It's everything I hoped it would be. Dominic stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. This place is a good start. It might be small, but it's got potential. You've got potential. Lila's heart swelled. I don't know where I'd be without you. You've done so much for me. Dominic gave a small shrug. You're the one doing the work, Lila. You're the one who's making this happen. I'm just here to help guide you along the way. She looked at him, feeling a mixture of emotions, gratitude, admiration, and something more she couldn't quite put her finger on. I've always wanted to do something like this, she said softly, her voice steady with newfound conviction. I've always wanted to give people the chance to feel like they matter, that they're not invisible. Dominic nodded, his expression serious. That's why you're doing this. You've been invisible for so long. It's time for you to stand in the light. Lila felt the truth of his words deep in her chest. She had spent so many years being ignored, dismissed, and treated as if she was nothing more than a maid, a servant, someone who didn't deserve to be seen. But now, she had a voice. She had the power to help others find their voices too. And that, she realized, was the most important thing. I'm ready for this, Lila said, her voice full of resolve. I'm ready to make a difference. Dominic gave her an approving nod. I knew you were. You've always been ready, Lila. It's just been waiting for you to see it. The room felt different now. There was a sense of purpose in the air, a kind of energy that hadn't been there before. Lila looked around, the walls filled with the promise of everything she was about to build. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be setbacks, but for the first time, she believed she could do it. She believed in herself. So what's the next step? Lila asked, looking to Dominic for guidance. You start small, he said. Reach out to the people who need your help. Start building your community. The rest will follow. Lila nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face it. As Dominic turned to leave, he paused at the door. Remember, you're not doing this alone. You've got people who believe in you. I believe in you. And with that, he was gone, leaving Lila standing in the quiet. Center, a woman who was no longer invisible, no longer just a background character in other people's stories. She was ready to write her own story, to help others write theirs. She took a deep breath, looking out the window at the bright sky ahead. The future was hers to create, and she was going to make it count. Lila stood at the entrance of the community center, the place that had become a symbol of her new beginning. It had been a few weeks since she first set foot in this small, but growing, space where she hoped to change the lives of others, just as her life had been changed. Things were starting to take shape, slowly but steadily. The center was still a work in progress, but every small step forward felt like a victory. The walls were freshly painted, the floors polished, and there was a sense of hope in the air that hadn't been there before. Lila felt proud of what she had already accomplished, but deep down, she knew there was still so much work to be done. She had never started anything from the ground up, but now, it was hers. This was her project. The people she was helping were relying on her, and she couldn't afford to fail. The sound of footsteps behind her pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Dominic walking toward her, his usual confident stride making its way toward the entrance. How's it going? He asked, his voice steady and warm. It's coming along, Lila replied, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Still a lot to do, but it feels good to see it all coming together. Dominic's eyes swept around the room, taking in the progress. I can see that. You've done a great job, Lila. I knew you could do it. His words meant more than she realized. For so long, she had only been seen as someone to do the work, someone to be invisible, and now, Dominic was seeing her for who she truly was. Someone with the strength and the ability to build something meaningful. I couldn't have done it without your help, Lila said, her voice sincere. You gave me the chance to try. I wasn't sure if I could do this, but now, I feel like I might actually be able to make a real difference. Dominic nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at her. You've always had it in you, Lila. You just needed someone to see it. Lila's heart warmed at his words, but the truth was, she still didn't fully believe in herself. She had spent so many years being told she wasn't enough, that she didn't matter. It was hard to shake that feeling. I'm still scared, she admitted, her voice a little shaky. I'm not sure I know enough or have enough to make this work. What if I fail? Dominic stepped closer, his gaze firm but kind. Everyone starts somewhere, Lila. It's okay to be scared. It means you care. But what matters is that you're trying. You're giving people something they've never had. Hope, a way out. That's something you should be proud of. Lila looked down, her mind swirling with the weight of everything. It wasn't just about the center or the people she was helping. It was about her. About what she had become. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into this world a few months ago, unsure of herself, afraid of what others thought. She was someone who had the courage to step into the light, even if it meant facing her fears. Thank you, Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. You've given me more than I ever thought possible. Dominic's expression softened, a small smile appearing on his lips. No, Lila. You gave yourself this. I just showed you the way. You're the one doing the work, and you're the one who's going to change lives. His words settled over her like a warm blanket. She wasn't sure where this path would take her, but for the first time, she believed it was a path worth following. I don't know if I'm ready for everything that's coming, she said, looking up at him. But I know I'm ready to try. Dominic's smile grew a little wider. That's all anyone can ask for. Just then, the door to the center opened, and a few of the women who had been coming to the center stepped inside, their faces filled with hope. Lila smiled, recognizing the familiar faces. This was it. This was the moment she had been working for. She wasn't just building a center. She was building a future. "You've got this," Dominic said one last time before turning to leave. As he walked out the door, Lila stood in the middle of the room, looking around at the people who now trusted her. She was ready to take control of her own future, and ready to help others do the same. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let anyone push her back into the shadows. She was finally in the light, and this time, she was going to stay there. The weeks after the opening of the community center had flown by in a whirlwind of activity. Lila had found herself busier than she ever imagined, organizing classes, reaching out to local businesses for support, and meeting with people whose lives she was determined to change. The center had slowly become a place of hope for those who, like her, had been pushed to the margins of society, their voices stifled and their worth underestimated. But even as she put in all her energy into making this a success, there were moments when she couldn't shake the feeling of doubt creeping in. Was she really making a difference? Was she truly ready for the responsibility that came with leading this project? One evening, as Lila was sitting at her desk, going through some paperwork, she heard the sound of the door opening. She looked up to see Dominic entering the center. He had been away for a few days, taking care of some business, and Lila had missed his presence. Even though she had gained a sense of confidence over the past few weeks, there were still moments when she felt lost, unsure of how to move forward. Dominic walked in, a small smile on his face. "How's everything going?" he asked, his tone as calm as ever. Lila gave a small smile back, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's going well. We've had a few new people sign up, and the classes are filling up. But—" She paused, trailing off as her uncertainty took over. Dominic sat down across from her, his gaze attentive. "But," he prompted. Lila took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "I don't know if I'm doing enough. I mean, the center is growing, and people are coming, but I keep wondering if I'm really doing enough. If this is truly making a difference in the long run." Dominic's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "Lila, you've already done more than most people ever will. You've created something from nothing. People are coming to you for help, for support, because they believe in what you're doing. But the impact you're making isn't just in the classes or the numbers. It's in the lives you're changing every single day. One step at a time." Lila looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the desk. "I just feel like there's so much more I could be doing. There's so much more I should be doing. I don't want to let anyone down." Dominic's voice softened. "You're not going to let anyone down. You've already built something incredible. But it's okay to take a step back and realize that even small changes have a big impact. You don't have to change the world overnight. And you don't have to do it alone." His words hit Lila harder than she expected. She had always carried the weight of others' expectations, of her own desire to prove herself. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and yet she still felt like there was more to be done, like she hadn't yet achieved what she truly wanted to accomplish. Dominic's words brought her some peace, but they also reminded her of something important. She was allowed to feel the weight of this responsibility. It didn't mean she was failing. It meant she was human. "Thank you," Lila said, her voice a little softer now. "I needed to hear that." Dominic gave a small nod, standing up. "I'm always here if you need to talk. You've got this, Lila. Don't forget that." As he turned to leave, Lila felt a sense of gratitude swell within her. For the first time, she realized that she didn't have to do everything perfectly. She didn't have to have all the answers. She was allowed to take it one step at a time, and the fact that she was still standing and still fighting for this cause meant something. The following days were a turning point for Lila. She started to allow herself to acknowledge the small victories, the people who walked through the center's doors, the women who came to the classes and left with a new sense of empowerment, the conversations where people opened up and shared their struggles, knowing that they weren't alone. Every single moment was a step forward, no matter how small. Lila knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges ahead, times when she felt like giving up, but she had something she hadn't had before, a purpose. A purpose that she had built with her own hands. And with that purpose, she was ready for whatever came next. As the days passed, Lila continued to grow, not just as a leader, but as a person. She realized that the journey was not about being perfect. It was about making progress, no matter how small, and giving everything she had to the people who needed her the most. The community center became more than just a place for classes. It became a symbol of resilience, of the power of second chances, and of the strength that comes from helping others. And as Lila stood in the center one evening, watching the people she had helped come and go, she finally felt the truth in Dominic's words. She was making a difference. One step at a time. The weeks following the opening of the center felt like a blur to Lila. She had so much work to do, and there were moments when she felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. Every day, she worked tirelessly to ensure the center was running smoothly, from organizing classes to coordinating with volunteers and gathering resources. The community was starting to grow, and she could feel the momentum building. The women who came to the center were starting to believe in themselves again. They were finding strength in each other, and in Lila's leadership, they were starting to see the possibilities in their own lives. But despite the success of the center, Lila still struggled with her own doubts. She often found herself questioning whether she was doing enough, whether she was truly making a difference. It was during one of these moments of uncertainty that Dominic appeared at the door of the center. Lila looked up and saw him standing there, as calm and confident as ever. There was a sense of purpose in his stride as he made his way toward her. "How's everything going?" he asked, his voice soft but full of encouragement. Lila gave him a tired smile. "It's going well. We're getting more people involved. The classes are growing." But she trailed off, not knowing how to express the doubt that had been nagging at her. Dominic sat down beside her, sensing her unease. "But," he asked gently. "But I keep thinking that it's not enough," Lila confessed. "I've made progress, but there's still so much more to be done. I don't know if I'm doing enough to truly help these women, to really make the impact I want to." Dominic leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady on hers. "Lila," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You've already done more than most people ever will. You've built something from nothing. These women are coming here because they believe in what you've created. They believe in you. You're changing lives." Lila felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest at his words, but she still couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. "I know they're relying on me," she said softly, "but I don't want to let them down. I want to do more for them, give them more than what I've been able to so far." Dominic nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "It's okay to feel like you're not doing enough. But what you're doing is already enough. One step at a time. One person at a time. Change doesn't happen overnight. What matters is that you're here for them, and you're helping them find their own strength. That's how you make a difference." Lila sat in silence for a moment, absorbing his words. She knew he was right. She couldn't solve everything at once, and she couldn't carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. What she could do was continue to build this place, this community, one day at a time. The center wasn't just about teaching classes or offering resources. It was about creating a safe space where people could begin to heal, to believe in themselves again. "Thank you," Lila said quietly, her voice full of sincerity. "I needed to hear that." Dominic smiled at her, the warmth in his expression making her feel more confident than she had in weeks. "You're doing great, Lila. You've come a long way already. Don't forget to give yourself credit for what you've accomplished." Lila nodded, feeling a newfound sense of resolve settle in her chest. She wasn't perfect, and she wasn't going to have all the answers, but she was trying, and that was enough. She was helping these women build a better future for themselves, and that was something to be proud of. "I think I'm ready to move forward," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm ready to keep pushing. For them, for myself." Dominic's smile widened. "That's the Lila I know." With that, he stood up to leave, but before he walked out the door, he turned back to her. "You've got this, Lila. Don't ever doubt that." As he left, Lila stood there for a moment, taking in his words. The center had become more than just a project. It had become her purpose, and she wasn't going to let doubt hold her back anymore. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. She had the strength, the determination, and the support to keep going. Lila walked to the window, looking out at the city beyond. It was a quiet evening, but she knew that tomorrow, there would be more lives to change, more people to help. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and for the first time in her life, she was making a difference. One step at a time. Lila stood at the front of the community center, looking around at the people who had come to rely on the place she had built. The room was filled with women, their faces marked by both struggles and strength, all of them seeking something more than just a place to stay. They were looking for hope, for a future they could shape with their own hands. And Lila had given them that. The past few months had been filled with hard work, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But now, as she looked at the faces before her, she knew it had all been worth it. The center had grown beyond what she had imagined, and it was changing lives every day. She could see it in the way the women walked a little taller, in the way they spoke with more confidence, and in the way they helped each other. They had become a family, and Lila was at the heart of it. As she looked out at the room, she felt a deep sense of pride. This was hers. She had created this. But even as she took in the success around her, there was a part of her that still couldn't believe how far she had come. She had once been invisible, overlooked, and treated as if she didn't matter. Now, she was a leader, someone others looked up to, and it felt like a dream. But it was real, and it was her reality. Dominic had kept his promise. He had stayed by her side, offering support and guidance, but he never took control. He believed in her from the beginning, and now, as she looked back, she realized that his belief in her had been exactly what she needed to start believing in herself. She had done this. Lila had created something that was helping others, and in the process, she had found herself. The sound of the door opening interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Dominic walking in, his usual confident stride carrying him toward her. He gave her a small smile, his eyes softening when he saw her. "How's everything going?" he asked. Lila smiled back, her eyes bright. "It's going great. The women here, they're really coming together. I'm so proud of what we've built." Dominic nodded, looking around the room. "You should be. You've done an incredible job." There was a pause, and then Dominic stepped forward, his gaze turning serious. "Lila, I've been thinking about everything you've accomplished. I know it's been a lot, and I know you've had your doubts along the way. But you've come so far. You've built something real. You've given people hope." Lila felt a lump form in her throat. His words meant more than she could express. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I could have done this without you. Without your support." Dominic shook his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips. "You've always had it in you, Lila. You just needed to believe it." Lila took a deep breath, looking around at the women in the room. "I never thought I could do something like this. I never thought I would be the one to make a difference." Dominic stepped closer, his voice quieter. "You have. You've already made a difference. And you're just getting started." Lila's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and gratitude. She had come so far, and yet she knew that this was only the beginning. There were still challenges ahead, more work to be done, but now she had the confidence to face it all. "I'm ready for whatever comes." "Next," she said, her voice steady with conviction. Dominic smiled, his expression proud. "I know you are." Lila looked at the women in the room again, seeing the hope in their eyes, the strength they had found in themselves. She had given them a place to grow, a place to become who they were meant to be, and in doing so, she had discovered her own strength. The future was uncertain, but Lila knew that whatever came next, she was ready to face it. She had built something that mattered, something that would continue to change lives. And that was enough. As the women gathered around her, some of them smiling, others simply standing in solidarity, Lila realized that she had found her true calling. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a leader, a force for change. And for the first time in her life, she knew she had a future worth fighting for. The future she had built. With that, she smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of something much greater than she could have ever imagined.